Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's NASC Preferred Supplier webinar, Benefits of Colostrum Supplementation in Companion Animals. I'm Bill Parker with NASC, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Adam Geiger. Adam was raised on a dairy farm in Wisconsin. He received his BS from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in animal science, his MS degree from Mississippi State in animal nutrition, and he received his PhD from Virginia Tech in lactation physiology. Adam has been with Zinpro as a research nutritionist since 2017, and now Adam is a business development manager for the company as well. Adam has an assortment of pets, a virtual menagerie, including 3 labs, a cat, 10 goats, a miniature donkey, 8 calves and cows, and Adam currently resides in Madison, Georgia with his wife, Abby, and their 2 kids, Abram and Adeline. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Adam Geiger. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir, and thank you for the introduction. Appreciate all of you giving up some of your time today to spend with us as we talk through a ingredient that can be used here in the pet space that's really honestly gained a lot of traction and momentum lately, and that is colostrum. There's a lot of talk about this particular ingredient and how it can be used in treats and supplements for our pets. It's been used in the livestock industry for over a decade at this point. It's getting some interest in the human space as well. So we wanted to take a little bit of time just to kind of introduce you to colostrum, what it is, and how we may be able to look at formulating it in to different treats and supplements for our pets. And so at the very beginning, I want to take a quick minute and just define colostrum. So colostrum is defined as the first milk made by mammals following the birthing process. So it's produced just like normal milk that any animal would make, except being the first milk that the animal makes following the birthing process, it is packed with a variety of nutrients and immune factors that mom is trying to pass along to baby. And so if we want to think about, we know what colostrum is. It's the first 2 milkings following a birthing event from any mammal, okay? If we think specifically about what colostrum is, or even what milk is in general, sometimes it's helpful for us to kind of break it down into its components, so we really know that when we are considering using colostrum or giving colostrum to our pets, what exactly is it that we are potentially giving them? And so when we think about the 2 main components of colostrum, we can think back to the old nursery rhyme that I'm sure many of us are familiar with. Little Miss Muffet sat on her tuffet, eating her curds and whey. So our 2 primary components of colostrum are going to be a fraction known as the curd fraction and the fraction known as the whey fraction. The curd fraction is made up of protein in the form of casein, and there is also a lipid or fat component to that fraction of colostrum. If you look specifically at the whey fraction of colostrum, there is a protein fraction in the form of whey proteins. There is a lactose fraction as well. And then there is the ash fraction, or the kind of the mineral and vitamin fraction. The reason that I bring this up is when we look specifically at colostrum, certainly colostrum is a very good protein source for any species, but a big thing that we're interested in chasing when we use colostrum is as an ingredient are those bioactives, or those IgGs, you might hear me call them immunoglobulins or antibodies, that are present in the colostrum that are known to have a host of benefits to animals, such as improved immune function, amongst many other things. Those things are proteins located within the whey fraction. Okay, so that is one thing for us to be aware of when we're talking about using colostrum and giving it to our pets, that we really are, for the most part, interested in a variety of those factors that are found within that whey protein fraction of colostrum. So you'll hear this term thrown around when we talk about colostrum. You're going to hear it's all about the IgGs, or the immunoglobulins and bioactives. And so the immunoglobulins, which could also be called the IgG or the antibodies, and we'll talk about that in a little more detail here in a minute, they exist really to provide immunity to a young animal, but also they can bind harmful pathogens or bad bacteria in the gut and render them ineffective so they can't cause harm to our pets. A few of the other ones that get thrown a lot, now there's a lot of different bioactive components in colostrum. We don't have time to go through them all, but a few of the other ones that get thrown around a lot are lactoferrin. Lactoferrin has a very beneficial effect for our pets, whereas it limits the ability of bacteria to grow within the gut. Another one is insulin-like growth factor 1 and 2, or IGF-1 and 2. Those are very important for muscle and organ development, and also play a role in health for our pets as well. And there's a lot more. There's various binding proteins, epidermal growth factor, transforming growth factor, proline-rich polypeptides. A lot of these have a lot of research that goes into them that shows the benefits they can provide to our pets. We just simply don't have enough time to go through all of those during this short session. And so when we think about an animal that is producing colostrum naturally, whether that's a cow or a dog or a cat, those first couple milkings where they're producing, or a couple feedings for the offspring, are going to be very nutrient dense in terms of those immunoglobulins and those bioactive factors. There's going to be small amounts produced in the milk as it transitions from colostrum to just normal milk kind of over time. But Mother Nature has designed colostrum to provide a very high amount of those various factors we just went through in the first couple days following the birthing process. And there's a reason for that. One of the reasons, which we'll talk about in a second, is that our young pets are born with a very naive immune system. And so we're going to talk about that here momentarily. But before we even get into that, we do get a lot of questions about, okay, well, how can I even supplement colostrum to my pets? And I want to be very clear that we're specifically talking about using dried colostrum powders that are created by various companies to use them either as is, or to use them within a supplement or a treat that is then provided to a dog, a cat, a puppy, or a kitten. We are not recommending using raw colostrum that is available or that is obviously exists in a variety of different capacities out there. That is not recommended. That stuff is not regulated, and the same quality and safety standards aren't there. So we're really talking specifically about using a powdered product that is available on the marketplace, and a variety of those exist. And so when we evaluate then these powdered products that do exist, we need to just be very aware that there are a lot of differences that exist. Typically, a colostrum powder is defined by the percentage of that product that is IgG or immunoglobulins. That may be a proxy for quality, and also an indicator of how those powders may be processed. And so you're going to have some products out there that are dried bovine colostrum, which bovine is the source for most of the colostrum supplements available on the marketplace. Some are simply dried bovine colostrum, which will have an IgG content anywhere from 15 to 25%. Some of them are specifically the whey fraction that is isolated, and those products will have IgG content anywhere from 30 to 50%. And so when you are looking at different products on the marketplace, it is important to get a sample, to get a C of A, just to understand what you're working with and what it's delivering to your pet. Now, when we think about some of the different products that are available on the marketplace, again, it goes back to what is the purpose in which we are providing this colostrum ingredient to our pets. Is the purpose for it to be an additional source of protein within a treat, for example, or are we truly chasing some of the different bioactives and some of the benefits that they may be able to have when it comes to using this with our pets. And so if we are chasing some of those potential benefits, that's when we really want to start to gravitate towards the products that are more highly concentrated in IgG. Because although that curd fraction is palatable, it has been shown in some pets to lead to some digestive upsets, and it's not providing any of those bioactive or immune factors that we're chasing when we give this supplement to our pets. So the question then is, when and why should we use colostrum and give it to our pets? Well, certainly, as we talked about a little bit, the newborn puppies and kittens are born with a relatively naive immune system. So there is opportunity for us to give this to our pets in early life to help them achieve proper immune function. But there's also opportunities with older pets, as well as some of our pets that may be athletes and competing in various competitions, including the equine species as well. But really, the general theme of why somebody considers using colostrum with pets is to improve immune function and gut health. That's really what a lot of people are chasing when they consider using colostrum as an ingredient within a supplement or a treat. And so I've mentioned this a few times. Most newborn mammals are born with a naive immune system. When we look specifically at puppies and kittens, only about 20% of their immune function is passed on from their mother through placental transfer. So that means the remaining 80% of their immune function that they are going to achieve and acquire needs to come from either colostrum directly from their mother or from a supplemental source, as we're talking about today. So if we look, this is kind of the immune function of an animal plotted over the first few weeks of life. The animal, again, if we look, I hope you guys can see my pointer here, and I'm going to turn it into a pen. But if we look here in early life, there's very little immune function in newborn pets, newborn mammals. In puppies and kittens, you can see here, they're getting about 20% from mom. But really what they are doing is they're relying on consumption of antibodies from colostrum, whether that's directly from their mother or for a supplemental source, to help them achieve immunity over the first 2 to 3 weeks of life. Something to protect them while they wait for themselves to encounter their own pathogens that are out in nature, right? So they need something to help get them through that first 2 to 3 weeks while we wait for this active immune system to ramp up as the animal encounters its own pathogens. And so that, again, is going to happen by the puppy or the kitten absorbing antibodies directly from a colostrum meal that it is fed in very, very early life. So when we feed them that meal, whether they are nursing directly from their mother or they're getting an additional supplemental source, they are going to begin to absorb those antibodies. Now, the other caveat here we have to be careful of is, number one, only 20% of the immune function that a puppy or a kitten gets is coming directly to it via placental transfer from the mom. The rest has to come from colostrum. But we also know that we have a race against time when it comes to helping our puppies and kittens achieve immunity. Animals in general only have a very short window of time where they are able to actively absorb antibodies from colostrum. That's where intervening with a powder product may be a beneficial opportunity for these newborn animals, because it allows us to get antibodies and IgGs into them quicker during that very short window of time when they're still absorbing them. So here we can see a newborn animal has the ability to absorb about 40 to 50% of the antibodies present in colostrum shortly after birth. By the time that animal gets to be about 6 hours old, it can only absorb about 15%. So we are truly racing time here, where we're trying to get as much antibodies into these newborn animals to give them the best chance at being healthy during their early life as we can. And so again, the goal here is that we provide these animals with passive immune function from colostrum. And again, some of that does come from their mother, but We want to provide them with some passive immune function while then they have the opportunity to encounter pathogens and disease in their environment and ultimately build up their own robust active immune system over time. Now, newborn animals are not the only ones that can benefit potentially from colostrum supplementation. Our pets are constantly running into stressors that are going to potentially compromise them from an immune perspective or lead to various other issues. And typically, when our pets encounter a stressful event, whether that's a pathogen or something else, the first place that's going to be impacted is the gut. The gut is the biggest immune organ in the animal's body. And when we have stressors that present themselves, there's then an opportunity for some of the bad bacteria that are existing within the gut to essentially get an advantage, right? And cause damage to the gut, further creating or further exacerbating the stressful condition. And so one of the benefits of providing colostrum to older pets is that we have the opportunity to potentially kind of bolster that immune system within the gut. Because we do know, again, that a large percentage, it's estimated anywhere from 60 to 80% of our pet's immune system resides in the gut. And I know this is a blurry picture, but a lot of that immune function is happening in the small intestines in these patches of immune cells called Peyer's patches. And so when your animal's encountering disease, what he or she is going to do is those Peyer's patches, those immune organs within the gut are going to go into overdrive, start sending immune cells to the small intestines to deal with the potential pathogen. And so one benefit of colostrum supplementation for our animals that are experiencing a stressor is that the IgG and antibodies in the colostrum can take care of some of those pathogens at the local level within the gut and spare some of this immune activity in the Peyer's patches and the immune organs within the gut for later use. So what constitutes a stressful event for our pets? It could be anything. A disease and illness is an obvious one. Changes in environment, such as if you go away on vacation and you're kenneling your dog for a period of time. Obviously, high activity and exercise level can also be a stressful event that can compromise immune function and gut integrity in our pets. And also the period when we have to separate our puppies and kittens away from their mother. That's an extremely stressful time that can lead to digestive upsets and a lot of stress for our pets. And so there's a lot of published data out there on the benefits of colostrum in pets. And I don't want to do a data dump here and go through all of them. But we do know from the published data that if we supplement older animals, now we're not talking about puppies and kittens anymore, if we supplement older animals with colostrum and give it to our dogs and cats, that we see improvements, a 13% improvement in fecal consistency after 7 days on a colostrum supplement. We've also seen a 112% improvement in vaccine titers in response to a vaccine in kittens as well. And so there are benefits from both a gut health, if you look at fecal consistency, and an overall immune function, if you look at vaccine titer response for animals that are consuming colostrum in a supplement. And, it's not just about puppies and kittens or animals that may be looking to be weaned or were just weaned off their mothers. There's also benefits and studies that have occurred in our older pets that we have. And so when we talk about our older pets, right, when we talked about puppies and kittens, right, we were talking about getting them past this kind of risk period where their active immune function isn't properly working yet. When we talk about a little bit older puppies and kittens, we're talking about active immune function is working, but we're going through some stressful times that could suppress that function. When we start to get into our older pets and talk about giving them colostrum, right, here we're really talking about an animal that has obviously built up its immune system over time, but due to the fact that the animal's getting older, there may be a variety of different complications and health issues that result from that. We're really just talking about giving them an additional tool in their toolbox when we give them a supplement that contains colostrum, supplement or a treat, to help them overcome anything they may encounter in their environment, any stressors they may overcome. And so when we look specifically in older animals, there's a number of studies out there. One particular study shows a 115% improvement in antibody titer response to a distemper vaccine. And so combining that with some of our other data, right, we really are starting to see the data that exists right now in pets does show that there is a host of potential benefits when we give colostrum to our puppies and kittens in terms of improving, potentially improving immune function and gut health. And then specifically, if we turn the page and look at our athlete animals, and a lot of this data does come from the human space, so the human exercise space, but the trends that we see in the human space do tend to correlate in very short time to trends that we see in the companion animal space as well. And so when we look at muscle building human and data in humans, for example, colostrum supplementation in human athletes has shown significantly increases peak anaerobic power during training, and it can also improve sprint and vertical jump performance beyond just using, for example, like a whey protein concentrate, similar levels of protein without the antibodies. And it's also been shown that heavy levels of exercise do lead to issues with gut health, particularly leaky gut in athletes. And that colostrum supplementation prior to and following these bouts of exercises decreases damage to the gut following strenuous activity. If you start to look at gut health in athletes, that's a really big space that's taking off here because we do know that extended exercise or robust activity does compromise gut health in activities. And we know that that's going to increase gut permeability in our athlete. We know that, and from the data have seen that supplementing human athletes with colostrum prior to, during, and after that activity decreases the damage to the gut lining. It also helps strengthen the gut lining as well prior to the stressful event or the strenuous activity, which is what is going to decrease the damage to the gut epithelial cells. And it also has been shown to help limit upper respiratory infections in athletes. And so there's been a lot of different benefits associated with athletes, which can then be applied to our dogs and equine species that are participating in some of these more strenuous activities. And so when we talk about how this is working, I kind of like to paint a picture of the mechanism in as simple terms as I can. So if we just think about a normal dog or cat, right? And what we're looking at here is the gut, and what we're looking at here is blood. You just look at kind of the physiology of the immune response, right? Typically, there's very few antibodies or IgGs that are just kind of hanging out in the gut, right? Most of them were absorbed by our puppies and kittens at birth or exist circulating within the bloodstream. And so what happens if our animal, if our puppy or kitten or even older dog gets into something they shouldn't, some sort of bacteria, maybe it's a new environment and they ate something they shouldn't, or maybe they just encountered disease from another animal, whatever it is, what happens when we introduce a stressor or a pathogen into the gut? Well, what happens is those bacteria and those pathogens are very easily able to overwhelm that small population of antibodies that's present in the gut. And at that point, it starts to break down the gut lining. And that's what makes our puppies and kittens sick. And that's what leads to this decrease in fecal consistency. So what we're trying to do, and the mechanism of action with colostrum, is we're trying to increase that population of antibodies and other beneficial factors that are present within the gut, so that when the animal encounters a stressful situation, that the likelihood of that bacteria overwhelming the antibodies in the gut, that likelihood is significantly decreased, and that the antibodies within the stomach can take care of it and prevent some of this breakdown in gut lining. Additionally, when this breakdown occurs, the animal then has to secrete antibodies back into the gut to deal with the stressor and the disease. Well, by this population here, we are preventing the need for that resecretion to occur, which is leaving more antibodies circulating in blood to potentially deal with other diseases, which is going to potentially improve overall health of our animals. So if we think about the main areas of opportunity for supplementation and providing colostrum to our pets, number one, probably the smallest one, is as a source of colostrum for our newborns, right? We know we have a short window for them to absorb colostral antibodies, and we know that they do depend on mom to achieve immune function. So we can come in with a supplement when they're newborns to help kind of get them over the edge and achieve achieve immune function. We can also use it in milk replacers or other supplements for young puppies and kittens to help prepare them for some of the stressors that are going to be coming their way in terms of maybe the weaning process, or if they're heading to a new home, whatever that looks like. And then finally, we can use this in chews, supplements, and treats for our older dogs and cats, or our senior dogs and cats. The one thing that we do have to keep in mind in all of these applications with colostrum is colostral antibodies and colostral proteins. They are proteins, so they are temperature sensitive. So we do need to be very careful if we're putting them into a formula for, say, a treat or a chew, that the temperature really doesn't get much over 140 to 150 degrees Fahrenheit. Because once we do exceed that, there can be issues associated with denaturing of the proteins, regardless of source, which can decrease how effective it is for getting some of the outcomes we're chasing. And now we share all that with you, right? Here's how we can use it in these different capacities, but how much should we give? Okay, so the dose that we've kind of outlined is based off IgG, right? So you'll have to know what product you have your hands on and determine the IgG content of that product. But when we're supplementing it into a treat or chew, for example, or if we're using it, whatever capacity we're using it for our dogs, cats, puppies, or kittens, kind of a therapeutic dose when we are about to kennel our puppy, for example, or our dog, or we know there's going to be something coming up that we're worried may cause some stress for our pet. Then we're going to target 250 milligrams of IgG per pound of body weight per day. If it's just kind of a supplemental dose, like an overall well-being, hey, I just want to give my puppy or my kitten or my dog or my cat the best I can give him or her, then we lower that dose a little bit to around 100 milligrams of IgG per pound of body weight per day. And so that's where we get into that conversation about IgG content, right? Because there are a lot of products out there that contain that curd fraction that are going to be in that 20 to 30% IgG range, which will result in a higher feeding rate. There's going to be some products out there that are in the 40 to 50% IgG range, which is going to result in a lower supplementation rate for our pets. And so we may have more flexibility when it comes to feeding it to them or giving it to them, I should say, not feeding. And when we talk about including it maybe in a supplement or a chew. And the other benefit of some of these differences, right, is if we do have a colostrum source that is higher in IgG, a lot of those other factors that we're chasing as well are going to naturally be concentrated as well, because those things are also in the whey fraction. So specifically, two I mentioned earlier, IGF-1 versus lactoferrin. If you look at like just the whey fraction versus the wholly dried colostrum powder, you're looking at a doubling to a tripling of some of these other factors as well, and not just an increase in the colostral IgG component. And so just if we calculate that out, right, if you've got two different products, 26% IgG product versus a 50% IgG product, and you've got a 40-pound dog with product A, that means you need about 4,000 milligrams of IgG, which is going to be about 15.5 grams of product per day. Whereas if you take that same calculation for product B, you're only looking at about 8 grams of product per day. So about half the inclusion rate, right? Which makes sense because it's double the amount of IgG in that product. And that's where we need to also just be aware of when we do our think about what it's going to cost us to give these to our pets, right? Product A is most likely going to be cheaper if you buy a bag of it, but the bag most likely is not going to go as far because you'd have a higher feeding inclusion rate for your pet, and it might not. There's other things to consider there as well, but that's the main one. Just making sure that we're comparing apples to apples when we look at giving this to our pets to try to get some of those benefits. And then I'm going to end my presentation here with what are some of the common marketing phrases that we hear out there. These are things you're going to see advertised with different colostrum sources. And I just want to share what they mean so you can make the most informed decision possible when you're potentially looking at including or giving colostrum to your pets. So the first statement is grass-fed. You're going to see this statement quite a bit, that this is colostrum from 100% grass-fed cows. We need to be very careful with this statement. The phrase grass-fed for colostrum is not a regulated statement. So anybody can say that regardless of the status of the animals that the colostrum came from. So all the colostrum that we would be giving to our pets is of bovine origin in the US. And only about 2% of the cows that exist in the US are actually grass-fed 100%. So little to no of the cows in the United States of America are exclusively grass-fed. They are given grass at some point, but it is not the dominant portion of their diet. So you need to be very careful of that. If the colostrum you are looking at does claim to be 100% grass-fed, either that's likely not the case or is from another country, because there are some other countries that do have grass-fed colostrum that they produce, but in the US it's not really possible for that to exist based off the dairy cow demographic. The first colostrum is one you'll see a lot, right? So pretty much every company out there that is producing a colostrum powder is only collecting first and second milking colostrum from cows. Some cows or some companies will advertise first colostrum, and those are mostly the companies that are drying down the maternal colostrum. And for those companies, they need to make sure that they do get as early as they can from the cow, because as we mentioned, colostrum production decreases with time. So if they wait too long to collect the colostrum, the IgG percent that they can achieve in the finished product is going to be significantly lower. So that first colostrum is needed for some of those companies that are drying down maternal colostrum. The hormone-free statement is another one that we get. That applies whether companies are using it or not. That would apply to all colostrum in the US. It all should be hormone-free. And the other one we get a lot is BST. There are currently no milk processors in the United States of America that will accept milk with BST in it. And also, there's no way to measure BST in a finished product. So anybody that's claiming that, they're just going based off the fact that no farms can use it right now, because if they were, the milk processors wouldn't accept their milk. But this would apply also, the BST would apply to every colostrum product that exists in the United States. Some are just marketing it and some are not. And then the 6-hour colostrum is going to be very similar to the first colostrum statement. The 6-hour colostrum, again, anybody that's collecting colostrum out there from bovine for use in pet supplements, for example, they're collecting only the first and second milking. That first milking is always going to come within the first 6 hours. And so this is kind of similar to that first colostrum, kind of depends on how the product is processed, determines how vital that statement is to what they're trying to achieve, and in making sure that their IgG content, their final product does not get too low. And so with that, I'm going to conclude the presentation. I want to thank you guys for joining and for your attention. I'm looking forward to questions. Colostrum is a functional ingredient that really is gaining popularity, especially in the human and the pet sector. We're really seeing an explosion in demand and excitement for this stuff in the human space. And typically, that's a sign of things to come in the pet space as well. And we know that newborn mammals are very critical on colostrum, their need for colostrum to help them achieve immune function. But there's also a lot of benefits in older animals as well. We need to make sure that we're carefully evaluating the sources of colostrum when we're looking at giving it to our pets, just to make sure that we're certain what we're giving and that it meets our needs. And then really it is more than just colostrum's not just colostrum, right? And a lot of us think colostrum in terms of, if we take it one step further, the immunoglobulins we're trying to provide, but it's more than that as well. There's a lot of different factors present in the colostrum that do allow us to achieve a host of different potential benefits when we give it to our pets. So, there's a lot of data out there to study up on and read up on and what some of these potential benefits can be with colostrum, and certainly I can answer any of those questions or provide any additional resources to anybody who's interested in some light reading. So I do want to thank NASC for allowing us to kind of share this, and I look forward to any questions.
First question is how is colostrum usage in pet health supplements regulated?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know specifically how it is always regulated in supplements, but as an ingredient in supplements, there are a series of quality controls in place that manufacturers must meet. And so I would work with a potential supplier in understanding what their quality control looks like and their food safety plan, so you understand what they're exactly analyzing for and how they're treating the product. But ultimately, it can be treated like just about any other ingredient that would be used in a chew or a supplement, for example, as long as it's meeting the specifications and quality metrics that you're comfortable with.
How is the inclusion level in finished products measured? And I think you touched on this a little bit earlier, but he follows up with, is there a validated test methodology? And I'm assuming he's talking about the measuring that in the finished product.
Yeah, and so that would depend a little bit on your formula. And so obviously we would determine an inclusion rate for a colostrum powder within your formula. And typically then, based off that, we should know what the IgG content of your final formula is for your treat. And we can then go back and measure that in the lab specifically for IgG content. That would be kind of the most reliable way to do it. IgG content would be measured there's multiple labs around the US and universities that can do this. They would use RID, radioimmunodiffusion assays. The Triple J Farms kit is one of the most published and used testing methods out there to test IgG content. And we could test other things such as lactoferrin or IGF-1. I guess it depends on your formula, what you're targeting, but that's where we would start. And if it's not coming back to spec, that either means we need to revisit our formula, or potentially there's something in our processing that's either not resulting in kind of complete dispersion, or potentially destroying some of those proteins that are present in the colostrum powder.
And his question is, does the freeze drying process have any impact or reduce the benefits of colostrum?
Yeah, so freeze drying and spray drying are two common methods for processing colostrum powders. We have encountered both, and neither have led to a degradation in the IgG fraction or the protein fraction of the colostrum powder. Obviously, we're talking about high temperatures there during the drying process, but really, it's a function of time, and it's also a function of form. So our colostrum is most susceptible to degradation when it's still in its liquid form. And then we obviously need to be very careful. Freeze-dried chews, for example, we have great recovery of IgG, but if we're looking at running it through some sort of system where it's extruded, for example, that's just too aggressive of a temperature, and that's really going to have a negative impact on it. But freeze drying or spray drying is not going to, from the work we've done, is not going to denature the IgG or the other proteins that are in the product.
Are there any safety concerns using colostrum?
Yeah, and so one reason I did that caveat in the beginning about talking about, we are specifically talking about powder here, and not, liquid colostrum from a cow straight from the farm, is colostrum is a bioactive material, a biological material, excuse me, that does present its own inherent risks. And so it's important to work with your supplier to understand their food safety plan. We need to make sure that bacteria and pathogens are being properly reduced per the governing agencies, their recommendations, and what is needed. If you are working with a vetted supplier and they share their food safety plan with you and show that they are properly dealing with any of those risks, there is no safety concern with using a colostrum powder. Zinpro makes a colostrum powder, for example, and we have a series of pathogens that we have to control for, and we will not release any product until we know that it tests negative for all of those pathogens. We continue to add new pathogens all the time, and so the product is very, very safe in that regard. But certainly work with a supplier or a manufacturer to make sure you're comfortable with the way in which they're processing their product, and the steps they're taking to limit risk and make sure the product is safe for pet consumption.
What are some additional benefits of non-IgG ingredients?
Yeah, so there's a lot of non-IgG ingredients in colostrum. Their functions within the body are fairly well outlined, but that doesn't necessarily always mean there's specific research looking at supplementing those to pets, for example. So we start to go through what some of those are. Lactoferrin is one I've highlighted a number of times. It is very important. It kind of takes care of the substrates that bacteria grow on. So it prevents bacterial growth, and it also prevents the ability of bacteria and viruses to bind to the gut lining. If you look at IGF-1 and 2, those are very important for growth and development. They're very important for gut health, and they're used by the immune system as well. There's another big one that's gotten some interest, especially in the human space lately, is epidermal growth factor. Epidermal growth factor is very important for skin and hair quality, and also hair growth and just kind of the overall shine and quality to the skin as well. And so there's a lot. If there's somebody that's wanting a list of kind of some of these different bioactives and what some of their roles are, certainly please reach out to me and I can send you a list of what we've compiled to this point. The other benefit of colostrum is we talk about it in terms of IgG. There's other immunoglobulins such as IgA, IgM that have more specific effects. Maybe they hang out at the gut lining more specifically and deal with pathogens. But then if you look specifically at the IgG fraction, some of those are generic IgG, but some of those are also specific to certain pathogens. So there's, for example, a number of antibodies in there that are specific to E. coli, salmonella, and even bovine parvovirus, which has cross-reactivity with canine parvovirus. So there's a number of, it gets more complicated than just simply looking at it at IgG. And I try not to oversimplify it as just talking about IgG, but that's really a good metric for us to be able to compare different products and to include it or give it to our pets when we do it on a program of IgG or milligram of IgG basis a day. That was a long answer, Bill. I'm sorry.
This is great. Thank you. And I've got another kind of overlapping question. I've got a couple folks asking a variation on a theme here. So are there certain sources that are better than others? And then I'm going to kind of dovetail that. Do you have suggestions for reliable sources for quality colostrum?
Yeah, I think for me, it does somewhat come down to what your objective is. But for me, a higher IgG content is always better because it gives you the most flexibility and it lowers the amount that you need to give to a pet. So especially when we talk about puppies, kittens, smaller animals in general, we give it to our goats, right? So it's a lot easier to work with a product that has a higher IgG percentage. So that's typically where I start. I would encourage you though to request a sample of a product that you're looking at using, and so you can say if the application you want to do is mix it with some water or something, that you can test it in the conditions that you're interested in. Obviously, I'm biased because I work for a company that makes a colostrum powder, and so obviously we're a company that I would recommend, and so Bill, I'm being careful how I say that, but ultimately you need to work with a company you trust, and you trust the process, and you trust their QA process and their food safety plan and their how they're taking care of the product and getting it to an end product in a way that's going to be safe for animal consumption. The benefit of our product is that it is 50% IgG, and it's very water soluble, and it's very palatable to the pets, and so that's the plug I'll say without getting too commercially on you, Bill.
Thank you. And then just to make sure I'm covering this, so specifically, most colostrum sources are going to be bovine anyway, right? So that's as far as sourcing, overall sourcing, that's going to be where the biggest percentage of colostrum, the ingredient is going to come from anyway. Is that right?
Correct. Yep. The colostrum is unique in the sense, well, yes, 99% of it that exists is of bovine origin. I think there's a few goat-based products out there, but goats don't give a whole lot of colostrum, so it takes a lot of goats to be able to get something that you can provide readily. But yes, it's all bovine colostrum. I would say the majority of it is all of it is coming from what is determined to be grade A dairies by the FDA, meaning that they can sell their regular milk for fluid consumption. There are, though, products that are not made and collected in the U.S., so that is an important question to ask. But the other thing that makes colostrum interesting is it's not this product that has an unlimited supply. For example, there are 9 million cows in the U.S. They give you colostrum for about a day after they give birth, and they give birth maximum once a year. And so once we've hit that 9 million cows and they're giving us colostrum once a year, that's the theoretical market cap on the material. So that's the other thing that has also gained a lot of interest for colostrum supplementation, because people are seeing the benefits, and they also know that there's only so much of it available out in the marketplace.
Next question is, what approximate percentage of immune factors can be passed on to different species?
That is a massive question. I do have a table on it somewhere that I can dig up. Puppies and kittens are one of the few species that do get some placental transfer, so about 20% comes from mom, and then all of our other species, it's 100% coming from colostrum, or I'm talking about pets and domesticated species, comes from mom or supplemental colostrum sources. And so if we just assume we feed a set amount or provide or supplement or give a set amount of IgGs to those newborn animals at birth, they will not absorb 100% of it. They will absorb maybe 50 to 30%, depending upon how quickly you're able to give it to them. And then that percentage decreases with time because as the newborn animal begins to encounter things in the environment, maybe gets a little bit of bacteria or contamination from the environment during the birthing process. Maybe it gets something off of mom's skin, for example. Anything that gets into the gut is going to start the maturation of the gut, which is going to slowly start to decrease the ability for that newborn to absorb IgG. So that's why it becomes such an important thing to give this material to them as soon as we can after birth, especially where we have large litters, and especially where we have maybe some runts of a litter or a set of animals. We want to intervene with those younger ones and those smaller ones as soon as we can, because they're likely going to have very delayed colostrum intake, and their risk of not achieving immune function is much greater. And so maximum, I would say they can probably absorb around 50% of what they're fed, certainly, or given. Certainly there's a fair amount of variation to that. But as they age, that decreases. And that's why it really is a race against time for us to get in there and help them out as early as we can.
Fantastic. Try to get to a couple more here. Seeing as bovine colostrum is most popular, how are the needs of the calves met? Is there a study that shows what amount needs to be available to them in order to continue the trend of supplying for pets/human?
Common practice on a dairy farm is to feed 3 to 4 quarts at birth and follow that up with another 2 quarts around 8 to 10 hours of age. And so really anything beyond that is going to be considered excess. You certainly don't want to well, the calf won't drink it, right? At a certain point, the calf just gets full, and the calf will self-regulate and tell you, hey, I'm good, I've had enough. And so that's typically right around that. That would be, that 6 quarts or so over the first 12 hours. And then at that point, they kind of switch over to normal milk. So a producer is really not going to try to feed much more than that, because the calf most likely wouldn't consume it anyways. I can't speak for all suppliers out there. We make sure that all of the farms that we work with, that the needs of the calves are met before they sell us anything. And so if you think a newborn calf, for example, needs around 3 to 4 quarts of colostrum, the cow is going to produce significantly more than that over the first 2 milkings. We can see it be, well over 10. Really, so the producers are going to preference their calves, as they should, over selling it to a potential manufacturer. And so the calves needs, there are some cows that will make just enough for the calf, and then there you go. The producer the dairy farm wouldn't sell anything from that cow. But a majority of the cows, especially the older cows, they produce way more than the calf needs. And so that excess is what would be sold and turned into a bovine colostrum powder.
Let's see one more here. Some countries require products with animal byproducts to be heat treated, which I expect would denature IgG. Is there a temperature limit or a time limit? And I think you touched on this one earlier, but go ahead and revisit that as well.
Yep, the denaturation process begins. It can begin at 140 to 150 Fahrenheit, but very small amounts, right? The full blown kind of denaturing is really going to start to happen when you get up to about 165. So different countries have different regulations, but typically it's anywhere in that 150 to kind of 160 degrees for heat treatment. We don't call it pasteurization, because pasteurization temperatures are typically much higher for milk. So yeah, somewhere in there is what most countries would suggest for proper reduction of pathogens and reduction of risk. So you might, at those temperatures, get a small loss in IgG and protein. But again, all the numbers I'm talking about are final powdered product, so that's accounted for already. But the small percentage reduction you might get in protein, that's peanuts in comparison to the massive benefit you get by ensuring that the product is safe.
Being sensitive to heat, how do you recommend applying colostrum to trees?
Yep. So we can do, and again, I have a number of folks on our companion team that I can also connect you with for what has worked in the past. They probably have way more options than what I have, but cold pressed, freeze dry, air dried chews and treats, things like that. Just as long as we're not essentially extruding them, are great ways to incorporate it into treats, just to avoid getting it to the temperature too high.
And with that, I want to thank you, Adam, for a really outstanding presentation. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Just a reminder that registration is open for the 2024 NASC Annual Conference. That'll be held May 21st through the 23rd at Innisbrook Resort in Palm Harbor, Florida. And you can go to the conference .nasc.cc to see our agenda and to register. Again, that's conference.nasc.cc. And on behalf of NASC, I want to thank you all for joining us and for your participation in today's webinar. And a big thank you to Zinpro for sharing the presentation with us. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and everyone take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.